Good morning. Last year, I met this lovely woman called Joan in the north of Scotland, in a small community called Laird. Laird used to be the central nodal point for anyone that wanted to go any further north in the Highlands. But in 1991, the bridges at Dornoch and Kailiscow were put in, resulting in her community being cut off. A lack of services were maintained, people moved out, and houses were left to fall into disrepair. Now, as a result, there's a lack of health provision, and Joan has seen her community die, and now she is unable to die in her own community. Instead, she has to go 2 hours away to a much larger population centre, leaving her friends and family behind. Although much younger than Joan, Kelly lives on the island of Hogg in the archipelago of Orkney. For 6 months of the year, she works round the clock in the tourism industry, but for 6 months, she has no form of employment. Why is this the case? Andrea and Alex live in Applecross, and they've seen their kids through primary school. They're now faced with the dilemma of sending them through high school, though. And even though it is only 8 miles away as the crow flies, it's a 3-hour return trip by car with no public infrastructure available. Andrea and Alex's kids spend 5 days a week away from their parents and not in a family-orientated upbringing. This results in them coming back to their community when they're 18 years old and not thinking that this community can provide them a sustainable upbringing and are already dreaming of moving away. However, this always didn't used to be the case in Scotland. The Highlands and Islands used to be productive and full of potential, and with a little change in perception, I hope to show you that that can once again be the case. The work I do focuses on long-term, strategic, and holistic visioning, working with communities from the start of a project to the end. And what I want to talk to you today about is not thinking of Scotland as a periphery of Northern Europe, but instead as a gateway to the Arctic. For example, could we see that in Toscaig, the ferry is reinstated to connect up the Applecross Peninsula to Ploughton, meaning that every single day, Andrea and Alex's kids can be sent on their way to high school, but coming home every single night for this much more family-orientated upbringing. In Orkney, can we imagine that we actually take advantage of the shipping routes that are now coming through the Arctic, which are 40% quicker than the current shipping routes? And how does this affect the community of Orkney? If a container terminal is placed at the gateway to Scapa Flow, then the islands of South Ronaldsay, Flota, Grahamsay, Longhope, Hoy, and the Orkney mainland can all be connected up, reflecting that of the fair ease that's just round the corner. But this loop that goes around Scapa Flow can connect up not only people, but also your water, your energy, your waste, your cargo, and your tourists. This would result in Kelly being able to travel only 20 minutes to Stromness for work instead of the 2-hour return journey that she currently has to face. And what about the new housing of the future within Scotland? Can it be Nordic in its design and modular in its construction, so that in urban situations, we have common access points where conversation happens between different people and different neighbors, but you're also able to relax in urban greenery. In rural situations, can these houses begin really small with only one-bedroom houses? So, for example, could Andrea and Alex begin in this house as a young family and then continue to add on to it as 2, 3, and 4-bedroom houses before coming back down to much like the houses shrinking back down? And with these pods stacked on top of each other, can they act as their own ecosystem, a place where they can grow their own food, create their own energy, and use new technologies as part of it? But most pressingly, can we actually begin to see that communities are formed throughout the Highlands and Islands where young and live next door to each other? For example, could Joan and Kelly live next door to each other watch out for each other, care for each other, and learn from each other. What I want to have a call for arms to today is to say do not think of Scotland as a periphery, but think of it as a frontier. Think about how we can care for communities, care for our young and our old, learn from the past, plan for the future, and learn from the stories of Andrea and Alex, Kelly and Joan, and think about new northern frontiers. Thank you.